armor on the move, a problem shared by military leaders throughout the world, a problem every nation must face, for it is a potential threat to their national survival. This film presents one of the most cost-effective ways to cope with this threat, the multi-purpose AH-1S. AH-1S, enough helicopter to do the job. 20 years ago, a gunship was a utility helicopter modified as an afterthought to carry ordnance. The primary tactic was to fly at the enemy, closing range until you could walk fire onto the target. That tactic worked well in a benign environment, but it won't work against a modern air defense system. Let's look at a fully integrated systems helicopter and see why the AH-1S can operate and win against the battlefield threats of today and tomorrow. A major feature that differentiates the AH-1S from any other tactical helicopter is its armament mix. The TOW missile, with its extended range and high hit probability, is the primary armament. 14 2.75-inch rockets can be carried in conjunction with the TOW to provide both offensive and defensive capability. For fire support missions, as many as 76 rockets can be carried, and a universal turret that accepts either a 20 or 30 millimeter cannon. This weaponry is supported by a sophisticated fire control system, like a laser rangefinder, an omnidirectional air data indicator, a laser tracker for accepting target handoffs from remote designators, helmet sights for both crewmen, a full-function fire control computer, Doppler navigation, and a heads-up display that projects flight and target information into the pilot's normal line of sight. Survivability must be of equal importance to weapon effectiveness. And in a modern battlefield, survivability means both passive and active countermeasures. Like an IR suppressor that cools hot metal surfaces around the exhaust as well as the exhaust plume. But this passive system is augmented by an active IR jammer. Here are the radar warning antennas, 2 forward and 2 aft, to provide 360-degree coverage. As an adjunct, chaff rockets can be fired to break lock or to jam enemy radar transmission. Other survivability features are closed-circuit refueling coupled with combat-proven, crash-worthy, self-sealing fuel tanks and lines, a flat-plate canopy to eliminate sun glints, an improved composite main rotor blade with increased ballistic tolerance and improved maintainability and reliability, and redundant, ballistically tolerant flight control components. It's a truly impressive, fully integrated systems aircraft. But perhaps the question remains in the back of your mind, is it more aircraft than I need? Well, let's fly a few typical missions over any battlefield of the 80s, and you decide what you would eliminate. Here's a simplified cross-section of the air defense systems that can be encountered anywhere in the world. A helicopter taking off from the rear area, let's say 30 kilometers from the forward edge of the battle area, would have to fly at altitudes of less than 350 feet to avoid the acquisition radars of SA-4 and SA-6 missiles. From the moment of takeoff, you are already within both acquisition and firing range of these two weapon systems at anything but low altitudes. The margin of safety decreases as you fly toward the FIBA. At about 5 kilometers, you come within the acquisition range of automatic 57 millimeter weapons. 1 kilometer closer, and you may also encounter the radar-controlled ZSU-23-4. At about 3 kilometers, you are within the acquisition and flight envelope of the heat-seeking Strela SA-7, both the shoulder-launched version and the multiple-tube configuration mounted on APCs. At 2,000 meters, you could be exposed to 12.7 millimeter machine gun fire from armored vehicles, and you haven't left your own territory. Obviously, you'd be flying NOE, but given the mix of radars and the variety of ballistic and missile weapon systems, the rationale for both active and passive countermeasures becomes apparent. The scenario gets even more complex when enemy helicopters are added to the battlefield equation. They could be out there looking for you and for the friendly ground forces that you are trying to support. These same armored vehicles, which offer you protection from enemy air power, also need your protection. Part of your mission will undoubtedly be fire support for your own armor. So a seemingly simple anti-tank mission has suddenly become complex. It has turned into several missions, each requiring a different weapon mix, a different capability. Let's first look at the weapons capability of the S. This rocket management control panel says it all. 5 different inventory zones to carry 5 warhead fuse combinations simultaneously, ranges up to 6,000 meters. 11 warhead fuse combinations clearly differentiated. A digital round remaining indicator for each zone, along with pictorial zone arming switches. There are 3 firing modes: single, pairs, or quad, at fast, slow, or automatic rates. There's a range selector and fuse timing or penetration selector. This single management station gives the pilot command over an unprecedented degree of versatile rocket firepower. It gives him the selectivity he needs to do the job right the first time. Firing ordnance is usually easy. Getting a hit is the difficult part. Consider some of the major factors that complicate a ballistic solution for either rockets or gunfire. It has been proven that a person attempting to manually estimate range will misjudge the distance by as much as 25%. On the AH-1S, the laser rangefinder reduces this error by 80%. Increasing or decreasing the velocity of the projectile by increasing or decreasing forward speed of the aircraft changes the trajectory and impact point. The integrated fire control system automatically compensates for changes in speed and range. Sideward flight or a roll angle on the aircraft induces a vector problem. The fire control compensates by adjusting the aiming point. Crosswinds cause the rounds to drift off target. On AH-1S, the omnidirectional air data system provides relative wind data to keep the rounds on target. Since flying and firing make conflicting demands on the pilot, the AH-1S has a heads-up display. In the rocket firing mode, there is a heading indicator, radar altitude with upper and lower limit markers, range information, and engine torque readout. Fire control indicators include an aircraft reference symbol and computed impact point. Since the reticles are driven by the fire control system, the pilot simply maneuvers the aircraft until both reticles are superimposed on the target, then fires. Here's the symbology used in the TOW pre-launch configuration. Again, essentially the same aircraft performance and range data, plus the gunner's telescopic sight azimuth pointer and the TOW launch window. Once the pilot has maneuvered the aircraft so that launch constraints are met, the gunner is free to fire. After the missile captures, the window changes to correspond to the excursion limits of the telescopic sight. This means the pilot can begin to take evasive action if necessary. The heads-up display gives you just the information you need when you need it. Armament on the S is much more than missiles or a variety of rockets. It is more than a 20 or 30 millimeter cannon and a turret or helmet sights that make sighting as instinctive and natural as turning your head. The difference is versatility, in being able to configure the aircraft for a mission like armed reconnaissance, where you can use the stabilized telescopic sight and gun camera to an advantage. Light anti-armor or heavy anti-armor, fire support or anti-air mobile. And whatever the specific mission configuration, there is always a mix of weapons to counter unexpected situations. The fact that the cannon can be used concurrent with other armament means that the suppression of anti-aircraft fire from two different sources with different degrees of hardness can be done at the same time. This capability is precisely what's needed to survive in the multi-threat battlefield. We've mentioned anti-helicopter requirements. Well, it's a real probability in any full-scale combat environment. Here's a good example of how effectively the AH-1S can do this mission. These films were actually made through the telescopic sight units. You are seeing precisely where the cannon fire would be hitting. We've talked a lot about hardware and shown that today's varied gunship missions can't really be performed by a modified utility or scout helicopter. Let's consider the human aspect. It would be very cost-effective if helicopter pilots could routinely fly utility missions, then be able to be good gunship pilots if and when the need occurred. Unfortunately, it is impossible to do both jobs well. The flying and weapon skills that are required for gunship missions are sufficiently demanding that they warrant a high degree of continuing training. The time may come when killing an enemy tank or losing your gunship may hinge on the matter of a few seconds. Performance like that can't be expected from someone who is only partially or occasionally trained. Here's a case in point. A group of pilots, just after their training cycle, scored better than 90% hits. 6 months later, after having been assigned to other duty, they scored as low as 40%. Can any combat commander afford the luxury of going into battle with pilots whose skills have been degraded by more than half? So we are all faced with some rather compelling real-world considerations. It would be ideal if utility helicopters could be effective gunships, and if any pilot could fly gunship missions. But a cold analysis of the combat environment will not support that conclusion. The AH-1S exists in its present form because the need is there. If you analyze the threat and imagine that you are flying the mission, we feel that you will agree. Bell has designed and built precisely enough helicopter to do the job.